Well, everybody, welcome to my channel. This is Heine from Rainier Books, and I'm in Sweden. I'm a booktuber from Sweden, usually living in Farsta, south of Stockholm, but now, once again, I'm in Uppsala in Sweden, 40 minutes north of Stockholm. And what I want to do today is the monthly wrap-up, which hopefully I will do more regularly this year, because in January I have read 7 books, and I shortly want to talk about them and about the pleasure or displeasure or not pleasure of reading them. The first one I finished in January was Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. It's a thriller, psychological novel. It's a great book, I think. It's about 2 women who are telling the story, basically. One woman in Florida and one woman in the state of Washington. And they're telling the story of how they sort of met one of the most feared serial killers in the history of the United States, a man called Ted Bundy, actually, who's never named in the book, but always called the defendant. Jessica Knoll has written a marvelous book, I think, about the defendant, but not about the defendant, actually, about the women who were murdered and who survived him and who fought him. The women who were so much more intelligent, so much more charismatic, so much more worth of telling stories about than the defendant himself. And that is something that Jessica Knoll is sort of delivering with this book in a very convincing way. She is more or less criticizing our relationship, the relationship that modern media and also, of course, the fans and readers have of serial killers, because serial killers are not special men. They're not geniuses. They are not charismatic. They are the worst of them all. They destroy young and bright and hopeful lives and bright young women sometimes. And that is something that comes out very good in this very exciting book, actually. It's very good and very exciting to read that one. Jessica Knoll, Bright Young Women. The second book that I finished in 2024 was The Vegetarian by Han Kang, a Korean book that I suffered through this book because it starts quite normal, more or less, because there's this Korean woman who is deciding for herself that she cannot eat meat anymore, and she's becoming a vegetarian. But then it gets worse and worse and worse, and in the end we have pornographic scenes. We have a woman who is slowly sort of withering away, who's kind of a hunger strike. She doesn't want to eat anymore, and she's only bones and blood, not much left of her. And this is also a little bit suicidal, not only a little bit, it's really suicidal. And of course it is a parable about how South Korean society treats women, I guess, and how women are positioned in that society. But it also is really tough to read it. It won the International Booker some years ago, but there must be a reader warning going out for this book, because it really can harm people who are not capable of reading about issues like pornography, suicide, and also about mental illness. The third book that I finished in the January month of 2024 was The Quiet American by Greene. Maybe it's a start of reading backlist books for me, because this book, The Quiet American, is really a great novel of Greene from 1955, where he is anticipating the Vietnam War, more or less, and how America got more and more involved into the Vietnam War. He's also having a discussion about how much a journalist can get involved actually in things that are happening that he is reporting about. Can he get involved into the action, or is that too much? Is objectivity sort of lost with that, taking action and taking part in a conflict? That is a discussion that Greene is leading. It's a great novel about the 1950s Vietnam, and also anticipating, as I said, the American involvement that comes a few years later. It's already there, but it's not that strong. And in that novel, you see that the Quiet American, who is a CIA agent, is one of the people who are there working probably for the CIA, who is sort of fueling up that American involvement. Then I had a German book that I listened to. It's called Putins War by Katrin Eigendorf. It's not translated into English, so very shortly. It's a very great book, I think, where this war reporter from German television, from ZDF, the second German state channel, is reporting how she came into Ukraine. She's a very experienced war reporter. She has been to Iraq, to Afghanistan, almost everywhere. And she's describing in telling the stories of the histories of very simple persons in Ukraine, how that war is impacting Europe, and what makes this war so important and different from any other war that she has reported about earlier. Another German book, Heinz Strunk in Afrika. It was just pleasure. I was listening to the author Heinz Strunk, reading that book about two middle-aged men having a holiday in Mombasa, Kenya, and very self-ironic and not so much truth in that, hopefully, how two middle-aged German men can behave in Mombasa. And Strunk is always very self-ironic, and I wish he would be translated into English, because you really could have his special sense of humor, and also his very short sentences in which he can tell so much about a situation and about how people are. He can describe people with just 2 or 3 sentences, and you directly know what kind of person, what kind of type he's describing. Then I read my second graphic, not novel, but my second graphic book, and that was a graphic memoir, Ducks, 2 years in the oil sands by Katie Beale. And that was a great experience, because I didn't know so much about the oil sands in northern Alberta and Fort McMurray. And there are so many issues. There's the environmental topic there. There's the gold rush topic there, because people are earning a lot of money who are working in the oil sands. There's also the one woman versus per 50 men situation, which is very toxic and very misogynist for women, and where women are very often treated and looked at only as a sexual object. That was a great book. And the last book that I actually finished this month was The House of Doris by Twan. I've made single reviews about both Bright Young Women, about The House of Doris, and about Ducks, and about The Quiet Americans. I made quite a lot of single reviews about the books that I read in general. I was quite satisfied with this month. I DNF'd 2 books. I want to mention them as well. I DNF'd Graham Swift's The Light of Day, which is a stream of consciousness novel about a crime that happened in the past. A man wants to visit a female friend in prison, and during that day, there's hundreds of pages of stream of consciousness and you learn something that happened in the past that sort of brought this 2 people together, and it was just too much for me. And I also DNF'd Penance by Eliza Clark, which is a fake true crime novel written by an author from the UK who doesn't exist, about a crime that never happened, about 3 girls committing a brutal murder in a small English town. And this is sort of written by Eliza Clark as a true crime book, and I really didn't like it. If you want to criticize true crime, you can do it much better if you do it the way Jessica Knoll did it, the first book that I finished this year in Bright Young Women. So there's really a huge difference between these 2 books, for me at least. And that was my reading for January of 2024. And how many books did you finish? I finished 7, DNF 2, and here I am reading a few books that I hopefully will finish in February. I'll tell you more about it very soon. Thank you very much for watching this video from Uppsala, Sweden, and I see you soon in another video on the channel. Bye bye. Hej då.